Does your dog start excessively demand barking or asking for food in training setups? That's a symptom that you need to make some changes. This commenter says, I do this, referring to an engage-disengage setup. But it turns into demand barking, expecting a treat or to work. The suggestion of both my coaches is to get her to lay down on her hip to lower her arousal. But isn't that just like asking her to watch me? And in the video this comment was left on, I talked about the difference between teaching a dog to watch you and playing engage-disengage, or at least playing engage-disengage well. And this commenter is exactly right. Just like teaching watch me, teaching the dog to lay down and roll their hip in the face of big arousal and in the face of something that is upsetting to them is not going to help them. This is another example of using positive reinforcement, of using operant conditioning to treat behavior concerns, which at best is going to be inefficient and at worst is going to be completely ineffective. This happens sometimes, and it is a red flag that we need to adjust our training setup. There are a number of reasons that we might see a dog engaging in that vocalization, and they appear to be sort of demanding a treat or demanding the next step, demanding that the human do the next thing, which might be giving food. And they are all signals that we need to reevaluate. The main two ways that I see this show up, although there could be others, are that the dog is over-aroused by the situation, and they are coping with that stress by trying to engage in the predictable and familiar. So they're saying, whoa, that trigger is way too close. This situation is way too intense. Instead of engaging with it at all, I'm going to avoid, and you need to help me. Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. So that hyper focus on the food or hyper focus on the setup, and the dog losing it the second that there's a pause or any room to breathe there, is a sign that that setup is way too hard. The other common way that I see that show up is that the food itself is creating too much arousal. Maybe the distance from the trigger and the intensity of the trigger are fine on their own, but you bring food into any context and the dog shoots up the stress scale out of their thinking brain. They're having something close to a fight or fight response just because food has been presented. And in those situations, we need to lower the arousal to the food before we can use food effectively in the face of a trigger. In neither of those situations is the answer to put the dog into a position physically that looks calmer, regardless of whether we get there by forcing the dog into that position or by giving them treats for doing it. If I put my dog into a down with a rolled hip when the trigger is too close, I'm still training over threshold. My training is going to be ineffective and I'm not helping the dog, and I'm doing something I think unethical. If the issue is that the food is too arousing, the food is still too arousing regardless of the position my dog is holding. And there may be other reasons as well. Those are the two most common that I see for that type of scenario. But there's pretty much no situation where I want to handle my dog being too stressed, their stress hormones being too high, with just changing their body position or asking them to perform a behavior.